Welcome to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. We introduce you to the voices of community thought leaders and changemakers who are working on solutions that face our fellow individual community members, neighborhoods, cities, and our region. This is George Koster, your host. This episode is part of our documentary series, From Bankruptcy to Reinvention, the City of Stockton, California. The documentary series attempts to provide listeners with the insights, points of view, and personal stories from the various voices of changemakers working to reinvent the city of Stockton. The interviews were conducted from August to September 2016, leading up to the election of Mayor Michael Tubbs, who is our central character in the series. The interviews in the documentary series have been edited to fit into our show format. The unedited full interviews will be posted on my website, georgekoster.com, along with each episode of the series.
I never knew that some of the educational inequities we faced in school were not right. I didn't realize that all students in wherever we're all dealing with this. So I finally at that time understood the importance of getting involved and really making change in your community by simply just being present.
As was mentioned by Lange Luntao in episode 5, part of the mission of the community group Reinvent South Stockton Coalition, created by then-Councilmember Michael Tubbs, is to empower its residents to transform their community through improving education. A big part of improving the education is through engaging the users of the education system, the youth. In this episode, we feature the voice of Jasmine Della, who shares her experience working with Michael Tubbs, as well as the Reinvent South Stockton Coalition in organizing students to address crime, safety, recreation, health, and the education systems in South Stockton.
My name is Jasmine Della, and I am one of the student organizers with Reinvent South Stockton Coalition.
Jasmine, welcome to Voices of the Community. Please share with the audience your background in community organizing, development work, and outreach in Stockton.
Yeah, so really it was 3 years ago. Michael Tubbs had an internship application, and a friend of mine had texted me to apply because at that time I remember being very depressed at the time, I don't know what I'm going to do now. And so he said, join this, apply for the internship, and then later on received an internship saying, you've been accepted to become an intern for Michael Tubbs. And I'm like, woohoo, this is going to be awesome. And from there we had orientation, and from that day it took off into, wow, this is exactly what I want to do. And then later from that, I really learned what community organizing is. From there, Michael had advisors that were really mentors to really teach us, what is it to be change agents in your community, and what does that look like? What does outreach look like? What does it mean to serve those in your community? And so one of the first things we started was the Marshall Plan, and we were talking about how does that affect young people. And so we held a Stop the 187 bash, which we invited high school kids, and we held a dance where it was a party, but the incentive to coming to the party was to educate them on issues that they were facing in their communities. So that was the first start.
Can you explain a little bit about what the Marshall Plan was?
Yeah, so at the time the city had announced their new Marshall Plan, which was address ceasefire and just new plans that they were to address crime and safety happening in their communities. So from that, it was just really highlighting how gun violence affects communities and how does poverty affect communities.
The purpose of the Marshall Plan was to...
Yeah, we were at a shortage of officers in Stockton at that time. We wanted to address beginning to bring 120 officers. We knew in part of our internship that one of the things he wanted to address was, obviously the Marshall Plan. How can we begin to strategize bringing in more officers, and what would that look like from input from us? So the Marshall Plan we wanted to address was figuring out, what are hotspot neighborhoods, what are stable neighborhoods for us to bring in officers, and talking about Operation Ceasefire as well. And we brought in guest speakers who were formerly incarcerated, who are also doing amazing things in the communities now in Stockton. And then we really did a call to action talking about how we move forward with empowering those who are ready to get actively engaged around the Marshall Plan. And so that's what entailed in our town hall, as well as the event we held for young folks to come.
So I'm going to turn back for a moment of your internship. So you said you did an internship with Michael. So can you describe what the internship consisted of, what you did, and how that helped launch you into Reinvent?
Yeah, so I began the internship with Michael Tubbs as city councilman. And at that time, Michael was really looking to bring together young people and figuring out what are, in the internship we did a lot of the first beginning stages were just leadership development skills. So we did a lot of history into what was community organizing in the civil rights movement, what did organizing look like post-civil rights, and just really looking at one of the main workshops that I remember vividly was we did the drum instinct major, which was basically following our own drum. And I remember we listened to a whole clip and we really debriefed for a while and figuring out what is it that we want. We all put together our self-interest, but how did that really impact communities? And for some of us, it was literacy. For some of us, it was crime prevention. Some was trauma. But really figuring out, how does that impact our communities as a whole? We later started a campaign with one of Michael's friends who came to Stockton, which was the Ask Stockton campaign, which was, we did 25 days of questions in August of 2013. And it was a campaign that was just asking people if they can reinvent Stockton, what would it look like? What are issues in their community? And that was one of our first biggest projects that we started. And when we interned, Michael sent a group of 12 of us to Tennessee and the Children's Defense Fund, which is an organization out of D.C., sponsored for us to go out there. And it was super life-changing. We met civil rights leaders. So everything we were learning that Michael was teaching us in the first beginning stages of development began to be a real picture. We began to really meet them. And I remember there was actual tunnels in Tennessee where we were actually climbing under, where the Underground Railroads took place. And it was just extremely powerful. And that trip is what has still kept me involved. It was just an amazing experience. Yeah. So
then you went from the internship into Reinvent Stockton?
Yeah, so I ended up going from that internship and transitioning it into Reinvent South Stockton Coalition. After Michael ended up creating the coalition, he knew that he wanted to begin a coalition in South Stockton, and we all believed in the vision that he had set. So I kind of started taking over a lot of the youth work, and we started a youth council back in 2014. And from then we were really just figuring out, what does our coalition look like? What would it look like? Who would be involved? And then literally took us a good 6-month to 7-month development. It was introduced January of 2014. And then Hector and then everyone else started coming in play. And it was an extremely fun place.
That was really the launch of Reinvent South Stockton Coalition.
Yes. One of the first kind of launch that we did was we did community assessment needs surveys. Back in August of 2014, we compiled a community assessment needs talking about, what would you rate the quality of life in South Stockton? What would you rate the quality of education, housing, health, economic development, access to child, youth, and recreational opportunities. And from that, we collected about close to 800 surveys, knocking on doors for a month. With some weeks we had 100 volunteers, some weeks we had 10 to 12. But we were knocking door to door, talking with folks in the community. What are you seeing in your community? And from that, we were able to collect data and just collect information to really set where we were as a coalition and what were things that needed to be addressed. And from that, we heard a lot, like the 3 top main priorities were educational and youth recreational opportunities, crime, and housing was also a big issue. And so we created committees for each issues, and we found chair members who were from the community members from South Stockton to chair these positions and really kind of establish a strategy plan to help serve those needs.
Can you talk a little bit more about the youth council you helped create it? What does the youth council consist of?
Yeah, so the youth council consists of a group of young people from, we go from 7th grade all the way to college students who up to 22. And a lot of us when you say youth, we consider, I don't know, it's different now. Maybe we say under 25, and then we tell them you got to go after 25 or 23 or whatever it is. But really what the youth council is, it's a group of young people, and they wanted to see significant impact and change in their communities. So we focused on, when we look at the coalition, we've always looked at as the youth as the heart of the coalition, just because a lot of the work that the coalition has done has been because of the youth. They've literally been the folks who are always ready to get up and go and do something. They've always been the ones who at random text 12 o'clock at night like, hey, I have this amazing idea about removing graffiti at parks or whatever it is, like always on the go, figuring out how they can impact their communities. And so that the Youth Council has been coming up with just really talking with young people about how can they not only just impact the perception of what things look like. One of the main things we hear from our kids is that they're tired of people saying Stockton is a bad place. They're tired of people saying, that we were the most bankrupt city, but we've come so far, and they want people to know that, we are making amazing strides and that the city is beautiful and that there is amazing folks doing work here.
And what would you say are the top 3 initiatives that have come out of the Youth Council that the coalition has worked on?
Yeah, so we started a project that we called Baby Hawk. And Baby Hawk, it was just a random name, no significant. We just thought it was cute. But Baby Hawk was a project that we started. We wanted to go into all South Stockton schools. So we went into Franklin, we went into Edison, and then we went into a few local schools. We went to Merlot, and we held town halls outside of schools too, if not all kids can make it. And so we were going into the classroom talking to students about what do you like and not like about your schools? What do you like and not like about your communities? And if you can solve those issues, what would it look like? Do you get enough support from adults on and off campus? And so one of the things we heard from that conversation was, well, our parents don't let us out the house because it's not safe. Yeah, for most part, it was just because it wasn't safe, and there was no safe places for them to go. And from that, we realized that, parks should be a safe place for kids to play at and be at. And so we began to address park issues. We were able to connect with code enforcement about blight issues in their parks. So there was a lot of graffiti, just a lot of activities going on in the park. And so we said, well, let's go to a park and let's clean it up. We went to William Brotherhood Park, which is off of Airport Street, and amazing park, beautiful park. And we began to take down graffiti, and we replaced graffiti with college-driven posts. We put a motivational post and just a lot of creative photos of what we thought children would like to see at a park. Color, and one of the things we knew was that one of the biggest impact to literacy was play. Kids need to play in order to have, the 5 skill sets to literacy. So by just addressing that, we were addressing multiple issues. We were addressing crime, we were addressing education, and we were addressing recreational opportunities for young people. So that was our first project. From then, we've done about 6 parks, really cleaning it up, removing graffiti. And what we've seen from that was that by just simply, removing graffiti, there's more active children playing in their parks. Families are coming out. Families are barbecuing at the parks now. So it's so beautiful. And then we see significant change in the amount of graffiti that doesn't come back. So, we anticipated, okay, we're going to do this, but if we give it a month or give it 2 weeks, graffiti's going to come right back. And we found that people have respected the fact that, they see that people are coming in and wanting to change and care for their communities. For so long, they've been neglected and unseen. And so now that we're constantly in these parks, I think people are starting to feel this trust come back. Like, there is folks here who care about, our parks, our kids, our communities. That was one of, a really successful thing that our youth council have done for me. And then another thing was we also addressed that there's just not a lot of services coming in. And I said, how can we build trust too? Was we held a Halloween trunk-or-treat event where we had candy in trunks, and there hadn't been a safe Halloween. And we realized that folks weren't even letting their kids go trick-or-treating no more just because it wasn't safe. And we said, well, how can we create safe spaces for families to take their kids out? And every kid deserves to have a safe trunk-or-treat and celebrate. So we held an event where we were able to bring together multiple partnerships to supply candies, decorations, toys, arts and crafts. We gave away pumpkins, and about 350 kids came out. And we're having an amazing time, and that's exactly what we wanted to see. Young people feeling like they can come to a space and be safe and know that this is their community. For so long, there's always been a sense of ownership of a community, and we felt that these were beginning stages of people taking ownership of their communities. And then another thing we did was, there's so many things we've done. We built a brand new playground, actually, Liberty Square Park, and Kaboom and Kaiser had sponsored for Reinvent South Stockton Coalition to build a park. But really it was the youth council and multiple other folks who were really the heart behind all of that.
You're listening to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. This is George Coster, your host, and if you're just joining us, in this episode we are discussing the reinvention of the city of Stockton, California. Our guest today is Jasmine Della, the lead youth organizer of the Stockton School Initiative. Jasmine is reviewing both her and South Stockton Youth's work to set up a youth council and address how gun violence, poverty, policing, and lack of safe recreation spaces impact their lives and community. Was there already a park there, or just a common space, public space?
Yeah, so it was number 1 or number 2 on Stockton Parks and Recs list to refurbish. And so there was already established playground there, but it was very old, broken down. And that community also hasn't seen much impact there. And so when we saw the park, we said, this is perfect. But before we even began those stages, we had talked with the community about the playground. And they were like, we don't even play here. We have to go to other parks because, there's not enough things for our kids to play. It wasn't safe. And so we agreed to build the playground, and we went forward with it. And we did children design days where we invited children who lived in that community, particularly if you can envision what your playground would look like, what would it be? And so kids were drawing their dream playground. We went into local schools and also held workshops with K through 3rd classes, having them draw out what they would envision their playground to be. From that, we collected and just kind of posted note, how many kids said slides, how many kids said rock climbing. And from that, that's how we designed the park. We had designers who are professionals who design playgrounds, but we were able to say some of the recommendations.
Provide design input from the community itself.
Yeah.
So what it sounds like is that through these efforts, the South Stockton community members have decided to take back their community. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the amazing thing about it, it's led by them. It's not someone coming in and saying, we're going to do this. It's driven by folks who live here and young people who've been most impacted. So yeah, definitely.
And where would you like to see it go? Your vision going forward, you've been at this for 3 years.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure seems like a lifetime.
No.
Where would you like to see it go? Because obviously you're starting to really get some momentum in the community itself and getting ownership from the community members. What are some of the resources that you would need to make that happen?
God, it's such a big vision. I want to be able to see kids walk down their street and play because they deserve to. I want to see kids graduate from high school and be eligible to go to college because they deserve that right. I want to be able to say for those who think that college isn't an option, but they're career ready by the time they're graduating high school, and that they have opportunities to go into these career fields would be amazing. I envision more safe spaces in the community to be easy access for them. What I'm hoping is that our young folks who we are really engaging with and training up would venture off to college, but remember to come back and serve their communities. And we hear so often young people tell us, I'm going to come back and do what you're doing, or I'm going to come back and run for city council because I want to change my city. We hear kids saying, I want to get into the health field because I want to be able to serve and open up clinics and urgent cares in my community. I've heard our young people say they want to come back and, or even now they're beginning to work on a restorative justice program that would be able to help young people seek help from trauma at a young age. And so for me, I think if we can do all that and provide opportunities like that, that is what I'm hoping for. This leads to that people would understand that collaboration is important and partnerships, and that if we can put whatever aside to serve our community, we could be a lot farther. And I think our coalition has done a great job in really bringing all different kind of folks to the table and really knowing that collaboration is important. And so I'm hoping to see that citywide.
Now, art is a big part of your outreach program as well, and I was hoping you could share with the audience a little bit about the art, but also your program that you've created, Stockton Legends, and kind of walk people through what is the Stockton Legends and how can someone participate.
Yeah, so from our education committee and also our youth council, this was a project that came out with a few people at the table saying that to address that there are amazing people in Stockton who have gone to do amazing things. We noticed that there was a lack of young people being excited about going to college or getting into career fields that they had no idea about. And we knew in Stockton that there were amazing people who came from South Stockton and who are doing amazing things. We have doctors, we have lawyers, professional, athletes. We have, musicians who've gone off and done an amazing job. We wanted to introduce students to them and give them another alternative. So we went into the schools, opened up an application to the community, which was a nomination application of who would you consider a local legend. And a local legend, what we considered were those who've done amazing things and who come from Stockton and who are in these career fields that most times a South Stockton kid may never know of. And so the idea was we bring them into the schools and introduce them to students, and we created a curriculum that would serve the need of the teachers, meeting the curriculum, Common Core standards. So if they're teaching science, somehow it's science relatable. We're bringing in folks who are in the science field to come into the classrooms. And so we created a directory that will support, these local legends can meet, science classes or history classes or whatever it was. We conducted interviews with them. We had students, and they had a rubric if they would listen to that person if they came into the classroom, if it meant something to them, would they listen to them, would they walk away with something. So we had the local legends come and do kind of a pilot run-through test with this cohort of young people. And a lot of them found it really nerve-wracking, like, oh wow, this is like amazing. And yeah, so last year we actually were able to get about 6 local legends into the schools. And then starting off in October, we're hoping to reboot and get more local legends into the school this year.
What would you say are some of your biggest challenges to executing your vision?
I mean, there's a lot. Sometimes it's really hard sometimes to get into the schools, or sometimes challenges can be placement for folks, and sometimes it's also communication. So we're all volunteer based for our education committee, right? And we had this where everyone's doing this, and we all, some have full-time jobs, some have part-time jobs, and it's like we are all creating this and we're getting them into the school. So there's not one person who's hired to really move the local legends. It's all volunteers, who built relationships with these different institutions to bring in the local legends. So I think the challenge is finding the time for everyone to do that with given limited capacity. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
So what is something about yourself that most people don't know?
That's a good one. See, we ask these questions a lot in all our committees, and I never answer the questions.
Now's your opportunity.
Yeah, I think if people don't know, I really do love working with young people, just because I never really had a mentor who was, there for me, walking me through it. I had amazing advisors who were a good spiritual support for me in high school. Mr. Moreno, shout out to you. Yeah, if we had more of those, I want to be one of those for folks, I guess.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Voices of the Community. You've been listening to Jasmine Della, the lead youth organizer of the Stockton School Initiative, who shared her work with the Reinvent South Stockton Coalition in organizing youth to develop solutions to the issues and problems facing their communities, such as working with the City of Stockton's Park and Recreation Department to refurbish park playgrounds, develop an ethnic studies program with Stockton Unified School District, and create the Stockton Legends Program to celebrate Stocktonians who have gone on to do amazing things and act as role models for Stockton's youth. Voices of the Community is a labor of love. This documentary series on the City of Stockton's reinvention is a tribute to my mother, Josephine Coster-Wiley, who grew up in South Stockton and passed away during the production of the documentary series. My mom was a first-generation Italian immigrant whose family migrated to Stockton and owned a motel on the Old Charter Way, now renamed Martin Luther King Boulevard, in the heart of South Stockton. Mayor Michael Tubbs also grew up in South Stockton with his single mother, Ricole Dixon. Throughout the series, you'll hear voices of community members who are working with Michael Tubbs in both creating new organizations as well as working with fellow community members to reinvent both South Stockton and the greater Stockton community. I want to thank my associate producers, Eric Estrada and Nick McClinton, as well as advising producer, Malcolm Cecil. Please go to georgecoster.com to check out our next episode of From Bankruptcy to Reinvention, the City of Stockton, California documentary series, as well as our archived past shows, which feature community voices working on solutions to critical issues facing Northern California communities. Please rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and share the story with your friends. Follow us on Twitter @GeorgeCoster and email us at george@georgecoster.com. I'm George Coster in San Francisco, and thank you for listening.